All right, so welcome to the Analytics Instrumentation Sync on the 22nd of August. And I actually have some topics again. I want to kind of clarify a bit and maybe start a discussion. Let's see how much time we have, or if you want to move this to a separate meeting. One thing that just came up also when I talked to Mihao, I think Dennis mentioned it before, that we're moving to using ClickHouse Cloud for the production cluster for product analytics. And I just, since this was kind of, to be honest, this was not like a long planned decision, which was kind of clear, I don't know, months ago. And what I realized is also that kind of in this transition, I mean, there was kind of bits and pieces communicated, but it might not be 100% clear of like, why are we doing it? When are we doing it? What is happening at all? What does this even mean? Does this mean anything? Is this important to me? So that's why I wanted to take this opportunity to maybe kind of talk through that quickly. And definitely then also, if you have any questions, answer those. What does this even mean? So I think to just start, as you probably know, normally we're using the original plan was we have a cluster that includes everything that is needed to run product analytics. The idea behind that is that it's the easiest to kind of set up also for a self-managed solution. If you don't need to kind of set up different bits and pieces and something over there, something over there, it's one cluster. You have a Helm chart for it, you install it and it runs, ideally. That's the original idea, and that's what we've worked on so far. That means that the distinct pieces that we have, so that's Snowplow, that's ClickHouse, that's Cube, all of them run in the same cluster. The problem that we've now been working on, and that's mostly Dennis that kind of pushed a lot of this forward over the last weeks and months, is how can we secure or make this cluster, get this to a point where we have agreement from infrastructure and security that we can host red data in it. Also to be kind of make sure that this is kind of all transparent and communicated is the problem is that when we right now we're only with product analytics, we're only collecting data from our own products. So we have it set up on the version app, we have it set up on the metrics, we want to set it up on GitLab.com. This data where we're collecting interaction data from actual users, but it's their interaction with our product. That's what GitLab considers orange data. So it's very important data, but it's not the highest level of importance. It's only metadata of how people use our product. So if it would get out, it's not the best thing, but it's also not the end of the world. If a customer starts instrumenting their application with product analytics, they will start to collect data about their product, which means that we end up hosting user data about their product, user interaction data. So I don't know, if they have some kind of app, we would be in our ClickHouse database, we would have all the interaction around, okay, how much did this app get opened up by users? And the problem there is also we cannot really control whether they're going to send along personal identifiable information. That's their choice to do that, emails or whatever, but we're hosting it in the end. And so it's really important that this doesn't get leaked and that there's no kind of attack vectors for hackers or anyone, like any bad actors, to get at that data. And so that's why that is considered red data. It's customer data. It's on the same level as the actual code, for example, that we host as GitLab. Same level of confidentiality. And making that transition of being allowed to host orange data in our product analytics cluster to being allowed to host red data from a security and infrastructure point of view, that's something that we've been struggling with. That's something that I think specifically Mihao and Nico worked on a lot to make sure that we have SSL even within the cluster, so it's not even only about encrypting things that come into the clusters, but even when we communicate between the different bits and pieces within the cluster, there needs to be SSL. And the one thing that we still were arguing with around with security is the hosting the final database, so ClickHouse itself within the cluster, and whether that's secure enough and whether we can secure it enough. And the problem there wasn't even necessarily that ClickHouse is that we have a specific problem which is not like secured enough. It was more around kind of infrastructure and security, having enough time, having enough resources to make sure that it's secure enough. So it's just kind of actually spending the time on making sure that it's secure enough. And that's when Dennis kind of discovered that ClickHouse Cloud, because ClickHouse itself is being used also in other use cases around GitLab. I think Piotr, I mean, you worked also in the working group for some time. So ClickHouse Cloud itself is being used all over the evaluated by different teams, and ClickHouse Cloud itself already in a separate security review, kind of completely disconnected from what we are doing here, was already approved for hosting red data. Which means as long as we use ClickHouse Cloud, we have kind of the approval to use it for red data. That's I think the important part to realize is it's by using ClickHouse Cloud, we kind of have a way around having to do the security review and having to spend all the security and infrastructure resources on securing our own ClickHouse. That's still something that we might do later for cost reasons, for just being able to host it on our own or something. But for now, our aim is to get to customers as quickly as possible, to get product analytics in the hands of customers, to have our SDKs used by actual customers and have them complain about all the things that are missing and all the things that we did wrong. That's what we want to do. And so using ClickHouse Cloud gives us a convenient way around this, because then we kind of have the implicit approval. This is currently for the production readiness, there's an existing MR. That's by Dennis, and the status right now is that security also didn't find any problems with the current setup. I can quickly share my screen because I think that this also shows something important around our setup. So the important part here is around this this architecture overview and how the architecture then looks like. So originally, ClickHouse would have been in here within the Kubernetes cluster, right? Is the image big enough, or should I make it any bigger?
It's fine for me.
Cool. So with this move for the product analytics stack for production, so not necessarily for all the self-managed use cases or something, but just for production, we're going to need to kind of, instead of having ClickHouse within here and just have ClickHouse listen directly to Kafka, ClickHouse moves outside, and suddenly it's outside of the Kubernetes cluster. It's still within GCP. So ClickHouse Cloud is hosted within GCP. You can, I think, ClickHouse Cloud works in a way similar to something like Snowflake and so on, where it's hosting, like creating the database. They administer it, but it's within your Google Cloud project and so on. So it's technically the data is within your domain. And all our systems now need to connect to the ClickHouse Cloud. That's the main change that we need to make right now. There's already a separate MR that I can link by Dennis on how we make sure that Kafka works together with ClickHouse Cloud, because as you might know, normally ClickHouse reads from Kafka and reads the kind of events from Kafka into the database. This won't work with ClickHouse Cloud. ClickHouse Cloud just doesn't support that. The self-managed solution does, the cloud solution doesn't. And so the what needs to happen to kind of have the stack roughly run the same is there's another kind of queue-like element, which is called vector, which runs in the cluster. It takes the events that are in Kafka and get enriched in Kafka and just pushes them into ClickHouse. So the big difference is instead of ClickHouse getting the events from Kafka, they're being pushed into ClickHouse Cloud, which means what we're going to need to do is make sure that the configurator is able to handle this and is also able to handle the difference between a setup with ClickHouse Cloud and without ClickHouse Cloud. So this is the idea for our production cluster and any other clusters that we would do that would handle actual customer data. We still want to keep support with the normal setup where ClickHouse is within the cluster, because that's kind of in the long run what we want to offer to self-managed people, and maybe even something that we want to go back to if it proves that there's good reasons to do it. But it's definitely not something that we want to drop support to right now. But that's something that we're going to need to support with the configurator. I can also I think we have an issue for that in 16.4 to update the tables that we use when we kind of cooperate with ClickHouse Cloud, and so that's something we need to build into the configurator to kind of make this differentiation between, okay, you're in a cluster where ClickHouse is within the cluster, you're now using to ClickHouse, like connecting to ClickHouse Cloud. All right, that was a lot of talking by me. Piotr, Ankit, did that whole monologue make sense to you? And what kind of questions do you still have based on that?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a very good summary. Thanks for clarifying that we're still gonna support the ClickHouse on premises, because I was wondering how that would work for self-managed. Yeah, looks sensible. I didn't know that we actually evaluated ClickHouse Cloud before. So yes, makes sense to just use the cloud version. I wonder if we have some plans to eventually like return to having ClickHouse within our own stack. It's probably too early to think about it.
To be honest, I could see it going both ways. So either we stay with this and we double down on it because it's just more convenient. Also, when things, when it comes to scaling. So ClickHouse, for example, they are also working on on something that could replace Vector, which is, I think, Click Pipes or something. So to directly pick things from Kafka. Right now that's still in beta, but it could be something. I mean, our expectation is that our production cluster is going to need to handle a lot more data than probably a normal self-managed solution will need to handle. So there might be a case to be made that it just has to be different because it's just so much bigger than any kind of self-managed solution. But I could also see it going the other way, that we discover that it would be a lot cheaper for us to handle ClickHouse ourselves, to host it ourselves, or that there's more kind of additional requirements that make it just better to host ourselves. Or if it comes down to it and it's all the same, then I think in the long run it would still be better to host ourselves in the sense of kind of just being closer to the self-managed solution. But yeah, I think, like you said, it's too early right now. Right now, our focus needs to be on getting to customers, and this also reminds me of something that I think in general, like we as a group also need to make sure that whenever there's something around the product analytics stack or something, an issue about something creeping up, which any one of you can see as potentially kind of endangering the target of getting to customers with product analytics, then please let me know. And by default, you can assume that it has higher priority than anything else that we're doing right now. Because it's just kind of, this is kind of the big blocker for us. I mean, we really want to get customers to look at this stuff and tell us what's working, tell us what's not working, for them also, and hopefully kind of start interacting with this and getting value from it, because that will also make it easier for us to then internally get resources to and attention from infrastructure security and so on to push things further forward.
Right, thanks.
So I had actually question about the self-managed one, like, but I think Basti, you have already answered. Like, we will keep both the options for that. So yeah. One more thing, like I'm saying, like we might need so the security readiness we also want to keep for the cluster, right? For the in-house ClickHouse, right? So that whenever we want to do a self-managed one, it should be there.
Yeah, and we definitely, so all the SSL stuff that we did so far, so that was, for example, protecting, making sure that even within the cluster, so because normally what happens is that SSL, for example, terminates at the edge of the cluster, right? So you go to the ingress and it, like, everything is encrypted up to this point, and then it's within the cluster and it's not encrypted anymore. That's like standard approach normally. What we did in the last months is kind of make sure that it stays encrypted, like on this way to the collector, it stays encrypted when it goes into Kafka or comes out of Kafka. And so that's something that we're gonna need to keep anyway, and we want to keep, because that's still, like, this is still like a cluster that we're gonna use. And I think also what we need to keep in mind is that even for self-managed, we need to learn a lot, and there could be a lot of cases that people, for example, say, okay, we want to like host this ourselves, but we don't necessarily, the most complex thing to run there, like, and to scale there is always going to be ClickHouse. So even for a self-managed customer, they might be interested in not even running the whole thing, including ClickHouse, on their own, but just running, like doing it the same that we do, like just running that part themselves and having ClickHouse, and becoming a customer of ClickHouse Cloud and having ClickHouse Cloud administered by the actual ClickHouse folks within their GCP, AWS, whatever project. So that could also be something that that is interesting. That's something that we need to learn in the long run, to understand kind of what are the actual needs also from a self-managed side of things. What would they prefer? How much interest is there in doing this? Because I could imagine, I mean, the most important thing for customers interested in that is probably just that the actual analytics data then ends up under their control, ends up in their AWS, GCP, whatever setup that they have.
Yeah, I can imagine self-managed customers actually going for ClickHouse Cloud, because ClickHouse is a resource hog, even more so than Elasticsearch, I think. So it's a big pain.
Yeah. Always the question is if they realize it up front that it's gonna be a big pain, but yeah.
Last question I am thinking about is like I think the latency. Like if we are running a complex query from the cube, how it will perform. Maybe like with the larger data we might need to see, like, because like one was within the cluster, the database, and another is a cloud. But I think maybe we'll know after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely something we're gonna discover. I'd assume that, I mean, that there's like two parts to it. One is the kind of the increased latency by it being outside of the cluster potentially. But then on the other hand, if we make sure that it runs in the same region and so on in GCP, shouldn't be too bad. And it might also be that by using ClickHouse Cloud, and my assumption would be that they have more sane defaults and probably might do a better job initially in optimizing the ClickHouse itself and the resources it uses for whatever size we have. So any kind of latency increase might also be offset by just a better speed in doing the actual queries. But that's also all things that we need to discover. So there's like, you're definitely right. I mean, there's new things that we're gonna need to learn here. Any more questions regarding this topic? All right, then I think we're already at a close. And from a time perspective, so I would push the next topic to the next week, where we can also see maybe that more people can participate in the discussion. Thanks a lot for Piotr, Ankit, for kind of bearing with me through that monologue. I think it helps a lot to kind of have people directly here to ask questions and can clarify things. And I hope it made things a bit clearer around what we're moving towards. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for the summary. I really appreciate it. And
Awesome.
Yeah, let's move the second topic to the next meeting, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks, Bastian.
Thanks a lot. Then have a nice rest of the day. See ya.
Thanks. Bye-bye.